Hi, I'm Zindzi, and I'm going to be reading a book called Sidney Opera Mouse by Graham Hosking, illustrated by Inky Stone. Here it goes. Sidney was a little mouse who lived inside a cage. A pet shop found in Sydney's north was where he spent his days. He had no chance to run around, had little room to play. The shop was damp and gloomy. It was dark and cold and grey. The animals were packed in tight with cages floor to ceiling. Conditions that a little mouse found very unappealing. It wasn't such a happy life. Poor Sidney felt alone. A place where he could sing and play would make a better home. Quiet as a mouse. It's a phrase some people say. But Sidney was not like the rest. He loved to laugh and play. Sidney had a hobby he wished he could pursue. Singing was the thing that Sidney truly loved to do.
I dream of being free, and if I had a choice, I'd find a place where I can sing and share my special voice. Being trapped inside this shop is not a lot of fun. And if I had the chance to leave, I'd run and run and run.
Then one day a massive storm with howling wind and rain guaranteed that Sidney's life would never be the same. The pet shop door crashed open. It made a mighty din. Poor Sidney, he was terrified as wind and rain rushed in. At the entrance to the pet shop, creeping through the grey, daylight where the door once stood, lighting Sidney's way. He saw a chance for freedom and he scuttled through the door. No more cage for Sidney. He was going to explode. Sidney sprinted from the shop and into the pouring rain. He ran into a station and then jumped on board a train. The carriage that he rode in was a very rusty banger. From the train, he saw a bridge. It looked like a coat hanger. The old train stopped beside the bridge and Sidney had a thought. He'd have more fun exploring if he got off there and walked. He didn't have a moment's doubt. Although the bridge was wide, he'd hike his way across the top to see the other side. He carried on his journey, but then he got a shock. Humans walking on the bridge across the very top. It seemed so strange to Sidney, but unless he was mistaken, the humans, they were only there to have their photos taken. Sidney wondered what adventures his escape would bring. He hoped to find a magic place where he'd make friends and sing. He loved the walk across the bridge, his very first time climbing. The mighty storm had ended and the sun had started shining. Sidney left the bridge and continued on his quest. To find a place where he could sing, he'd try his very best. He saw a sign next to a bus, sightseeing tours today. He thought that getting on the bus would help him on his way. He climbed aboard the big red bus and went up to the top. The red bus did not have a roof, so he could see a lot. The city had museums, an aquarium and zoo. The place where lots of tourists go to see a kangaroo. The bus arrived at Bondi. Sidney climbed down onto turf. In front of him was golden sand and bright blue Bondi surf. Swim or surf, build sandcastles. There was so much to do. Sidney ran down to the beach. He would try something new. A girl sat on her surfboard. It was painted red and black. She didn't notice Sidney. He had sneaked on to the back. The surfer paddled out to sea and then she caught a wave. Some might say a little mouse had never been so brave. Sidney felt amazing as they raced towards the shore, proud because no other mouse had ever surfed before. Then the surfer stumbled and she dropped down to one knee. Sidney slipped right off the board and fell into the sea. He'd never been to lessons. Little Sidney could not swim. Thank goodness for the kindness of Diane, the blue dolphin. She swam in front of Sidney and he grabbed onto her flipper. "Thanks so much for saving me. You are a little ripper." "What brings a mouse to Bondi Beach?" Diane then promptly asked.
To find friends and a place to sing, but it's a tricky task.
Diane knew of an opera house with singing mice aplenty. Benny Seal, her friend, had told her there were more than 20.
Tell me, please, where is this house? It's where I'd love to be.
Diane replied, "The harbour near a place called Circular Quay." Sidney thanked Diane as she returned him to dry land. She replied, "No worries, mate," and flung him on the sand. Sidney found a ferry. It was glistening gold and green. Freshly painted, bold and bright, the colours were pristine. Sidney jumped aboard and he had cause for celebration. Circular Quay was going to be the ferry's destination. The ferry reached the city and one building topped the lot. The strangely shaped white roofs looked like the sails of a yacht. The ferry passed the building and to Sidney's great surprise, a seal relaxing on the steps was eating hot meat pies. Sidney knew the seal's name and without thinking twice said,
Benny, can you help me please? I'm looking for some mice. I met Diane the dolphin and she said that you could give directions to a special house where lots of mice do live.
"Yes, I can, my furry friend. It isn't hard to find." He then pointed a flipper at the white building behind. "When the clock strikes midnight and the humans have departed, the mice come out from hiding and performances are started. Creatures from across the world attend to watch them play, so if you don't like music, I suggest you stay away." Sidney was ecstatic as his favourite thing was song. Finally, he'd found where he was destined to belong. Sidney scampered from the ferry out onto the steps. He saw the opera house stage door, and in through it he crept. The tip from new friend Benny turned out to be quite true. Sidney found a room of mice all sitting, eating stew. They gave Sidney some dinner and invited him to stay. Sidney told them all about his crazy, bonkers day. When the food was gobbled up, the music then began. Some mice were playing instruments. Now Sidney had a plan. He started singing softly, and nobody said a word. He had the greatest singing voice that they had ever heard. You've never seen a little mouse whose smile is quite so wide. Performing with his newfound friends fills Sidney's heart with pride. Due to his performances at Sidney Opera House, his friends and fans alike now call him Sidney Opera Mouse. Sidney used to be alone and trapped inside a cage, but now, with friends, he lives his dreams performing on the stage. He took a chance and chased his dreams. Just look how far he's come. But Sidney's big adventures, they have only just begun. And that's the end of the story.
La, la.